Across the United States, a quiet crisis is unfolding as countless animal species are being displaced from their natural habitats due to human activities and climate change. Urban expansion, deforestation, pollution, and rising temperatures are pushing wildlife out of the ecosystems they've called home for generations, often leaving them with nowhere safe to go. In this video, we'll take a captivating journey across the country to reveal the most displaced animal in each state and why they're in trouble. These animals are more than just statistics. They are vital parts of ecosystems, now unraveling under pressure from development, industry, and ecological imbalance. Let's begin in Alabama, where the gopher tortoise faces serious displacement as its sandy habitats are destroyed by agriculture, road building, and urban sprawl. In Alaska, the polar bear is losing its sea ice hunting grounds, forcing it to swim longer distances and venture dangerously close to human communities. Arizona's javelinas are being pushed into fragmented desert patches as highways, subdivisions, and fences cut through once continuous Sonoran landscapes. The eastern collared lizard in Arkansas is being displaced from its rocky glades due to fire suppression, invasive vegetation, and land conversion for agriculture. In California, the San Joaquin kit fox is barely hanging on as oil fields and farmlands swallow up the dry grasslands it needs to survive. Colorado's elusive Canada lynx is in danger as recreational development and logging carve up the snowy forests they depend on for shelter and prey. Connecticut's native New England cottontail is being outcompeted and displaced by the more adaptable eastern cottontail, especially in fragmented young forests. In Delaware, the tiny bog turtle is rapidly disappearing as wetlands are drained, polluted, or encroached upon by residential development and invasive plant species. Florida's iconic panther is confined to a shrinking corridor of habitat, increasingly struck by vehicles as it attempts to navigate sprawling suburbs and farmland. Georgia's loggerhead sea turtles are suffering as beachfront lighting and infrastructure confuse hatchlings, driving them away from the sea and toward danger. The Hawaiian monk seal, native only to Hawaii, is being displaced by overfishing, ocean warming, and tourism that intrudes on its limited haul-out beaches. Idaho's greater sage grouse is losing essential breeding grounds, called leks, due to invasive grasses, drought, wildfires, and oil and gas development. In Illinois, the Blandings turtle faces displacement as wetland loss, road mortality, and habitat fragmentation prevent it from reaching nesting and overwintering sites. Indiana's rare hellbender salamander is in sharp decline, displaced by sedimentation, pollution, and damming that have degraded the clear, rocky rivers it needs to thrive. Iowa's greater prairie chicken has been nearly eliminated, as once vast grasslands have been converted into cornfields, leaving no space for traditional mating displays. The black-footed ferret in Kansas is largely displaced, having lost its prairie dog colonies to poisoning campaigns and cropland expansion across its native habitat. Kentucky's Indiana bat is vanishing due to the destruction of roosting caves and summer forests, with white nose syndrome further shrinking its numbers. Louisiana's reintroduced whooping cranes are struggling to establish themselves as their wetland habitats shrink under the pressure of levees, oil rigs, and agriculture. In Maine, the Canada lynx is retreating from the southern edge of its range as warming winters and logging alter the snowy forests it relies on. Maryland's Delmarva fox squirrel is confined to scattered fragments of pine forest, threatened by road mortality and urban encroachment. Massachusetts has seen a steep decline in piping plovers, who are increasingly forced to nest on fenced-off beaches surrounded by tourist activity and dogs. Michigan's Kirtland's warbler is a conservation success story, but remains highly vulnerable to displacement as jack pine forests become increasingly rare. Minnesota's moose population is declining as warmer winters promote the spread of ticks and diseases, while fragmented forests add additional stress. Mississippi's red-cockaded woodpecker, a bird that relies on mature longleaf pine, is displaced by decades of logging and fire suppression. Missouri's blind Ozark cavefish is increasingly threatened as groundwater pollution and quarrying disturb the delicate underground streams it calls home. In Montana, the swift fox has been squeezed out of grasslands by livestock grazing, poisoned prey, and a loss of native prairie. Nebraska's greater prairie chickens now exist in pockets, isolated by wind farms, roads, and agricultural expansion that break up their historical range. Nevada's desert tortoise is declining rapidly due to habitat destruction by off-road vehicles, urban expansion, and the spread of invasive grasses. The Bicknell's thrush, found in New Hampshire's highest peaks, is at risk as warming climates shift the tree line beyond its breeding grounds. New Jersey's Pine Barrens tree frog is highly sensitive to habitat loss, especially as wetlands are drained and polluted by nearby development. New Mexico's endangered Mexican gray wolf faces constant conflict with ranchers, limited gene pools, and poorly connected reintroduction zones. New York's short-nosed sturgeon has been displaced by river dams and industrial pollution, which have disrupted the spawning migrations it depends on. North Carolina's red wolf, one of the world's most endangered canids, is squeezed into ever smaller reserves as interbreeding and poaching continue. In North Dakota, the black-tailed prairie dog is losing ground due to extermination campaigns, habitat fragmentation, and competition with agriculture. Ohio's eastern box turtle is disappearing from suburban woodlands and meadows due to traffic, lawnmowers, and removal from the wild. Oklahoma's lesser prairie chicken is losing its mating grounds to oil infrastructure, fencing, and crop fields replacing native prairie grasses. In Oregon, the fisher is displaced by the removal of old-growth forests it uses for denning, as well as by illegal trapping and road building. Pennsylvania's northern flying squirrel is being replaced by its southern cousin, as rising temperatures and habitat fragmentation change forest compositions. Rhode Island's loggerhead shrike, once a common songbird, is now rare due to suburban development that has removed its open hunting habitats. South Carolina's diamondback terrapins are frequently killed in crab traps or pushed out by shoreline hardening and sea level rise. In South Dakota, bison were once a keystone species, but are now largely limited to fenced preserves after being eradicated from open prairie. Tennessee's cave salamanders face extinction pressures from water contamination, habitat disruption, and tourism disturbing delicate subterranean ecosystems. Texas's elusive ocelot is nearly gone, with thorn scrub habitat replaced by roads, ranches, and border barriers that prevent dispersal. Utah's sage grouse are rapidly declining due to oil and gas drilling, invasive grasses, and a loss of uninterrupted sagebrush terrain. Vermont's spruce grouse is slowly vanishing as warming climates shrink the boreal forests it depends on for food, cover, and nesting. Virginia's big-eared bats are being pushed out by deforestation, recreational caving, and diseases that affect bat colonies. Washington's northern spotted owl is caught in a battle for territory with barred owls, even as its old-growth forest home continues to shrink. West Virginia's Cheat Mountain salamander is restricted to high elevations, where logging and climate change are pushing it closer to extinction. Wisconsin's gray wolf faces constant threats from legal hunting, habitat loss, and political battles that determine its future protection status. Wyoming's sage thrasher is declining as sagebrush deserts give way to energy extraction sites, overgrazing, and invasive weeds that change fire cycles. Each displaced animal tells a deeper story about the complex relationships between land, wildlife, and human choices. Displacement doesn't just mean fewer animals, It means unraveling ecosystems, lost pollinators, damaged food webs, and weakened climate resilience. For many species, the window for recovery is closing fast as habitat loss outpaces conservation efforts and public awareness. Displacement often begins slowly, invisible to the average person, until suddenly an animal is gone and the damage is irreversible. Scientists and conservationists are working around the clock to protect key species, but they need policy support and public engagement to succeed. Reconnecting fragmented habitats through wildlife corridors and habitat restoration is one of the most effective ways to combat displacement. Legal protections must be strengthened and enforced to ensure these species have more than just a theoretical right to exist. Public awareness, community-led conservation, and responsible land use planning are critical if we want to halt this trend. By supporting native habitat preservation, reducing unnecessary development, and promoting biodiversity, we can turn the tide for displaced wildlife. These animals are not just victims, they are signals, warning us that the ecosystems we depend on are also at risk. The question is not whether these animals can survive, but whether we're willing to make space for them to return. Every state has a responsibility to its wild heritage, and every citizen can play a part in protecting it. If we act now, there's still time to save these species and restore the balance they represent in nature. So the next time you see a patch of woods, prairie, or wetland, consider the creatures it shelters and what it might mean to lose them.